everybody, and welcome to the Commander Pod, your Magic the Gathering podcast for all things Commander. My name is Keltson Howell.
And I'm Spencer Simpson. And before we get into it, we have some follow-up on our New Year's resolutions that we told you last week. We were pretty quick on some of these. Mine being attending a CDH tournament, which I attended several days after recording the previous episode. It was really fun. I went to Snowy Summit too. I took Tasigur the Golden Fang as my commander, kind of a turbo-ish version of Tasigur. I learned a lot. I did not do as well as I would have hoped. I went 0, 2, and 3, win, loss, draw.
Okay, you say you didn't do as well as you hoped. I think you did really well from an outside perspective. This being your first CEDH tournament, like, you still got 3 points, right?
I got 3 points. Yeah, because it's 5 points for a win, 1 point for a draw, 0 point for a loss. So,
yeah,
I think I did okay. The thing that makes me bummed is one of my draws, I had like a turn 2 Necropotence, and probably could have taken it. People had tons of interaction though. People were able to like interact a lot when I tried to go for a win on my turn, and I held up enough that I think I could have still tried to go for another win. I potentially should have held up an advantage. Anyways, I've been thinking about that one a lot. I was pretty close. And then there was another one where I tried to sneak it in ad nauseum. And tons of people had interacted. And I think I ad naused at the wrong time. And I think ultimately what I didn't do is politic enough. Like, people would cast something targeting my things. And because it's a tournament, my brain was like, okay, well, that's done. You know what I mean? But what I should have been was like, whoa. Like, okay, I understand that, like, I had a turn 2 Necropotence, but, like, you just stopped me. This person is about to put down a Rest in Peace, which really stops me, even though I had, like, a Force of Negation in hand to stop the Rest in Peace. You know what I mean? But I still could have been like, I don't think you need to interact with me here. I think we need to, like, make sure other people aren't just, like, running away with advantage. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think I could have probably politicked my way into a win in a couple scenarios a little better.
And that is something that's acceptable in CEDH, right? Like, politicking is part of the game.
Yeah,
even at the competitive levels.
Yeah, which is really interesting because I think part of the reason I wanted to play more competitive Magic is because I wanted to maybe do less politics. Do you know what I mean? Like, it felt like you'd maybe do less. But it's interesting to me that I think you end up doing more politicking at high levels, Commander, though the politicking is different. You know what I mean? It's like, because everyone kind of know. Like, you're not, like, pulling the wool over anyone's eyes necessarily.
Yeah, because there's a meta. And people know what the meta is.
And people know how you're going to win, right?
Yeah.
And so, but people will be like, hey, like, look, here's my hand. Like, I don't have anything. Do you know what I mean? Or, like, we'll show them a card of, like, hey, I can cast this.
Which you would never do in 1v1 competitive Magic.
No, absolutely not. So there's tons of politicking happening, but the politicking is different than in, like, casual, where the politicking would be like, hey, swing at him and I won't remove your thing or whatever. Do you know what I mean?
Sure, totally. So so maybe it's not that it's competitive. Maybe that's not the difference. It's just that inherently it's a multiplayer format, and so it's going to have politicking. Just if you have multiple players, then there is, like, way more communication happening than in a 1v1 format.
Yeah, exactly. I think something that I need to be more confident doing is showing people, like, listen, I have a Force of Will or a Fierce Guardianship or whatever. Like, I will stop you. Like, you know what I mean? And I think there's a way to strategically do that. Like, give people information, but then you don't have to use your spell. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's like a...
You could bluff.
Yeah, you could bluff, but you could also, like, actually show them, be like, look, I have a Fierce Guardianship. Yeah. And then they won't end up casting a spell that you can counter with a Fierce Guardianship. And you don't. So
then it's like you have a second Fierce Guardianship.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I had someone in our last game do that to me pretty effectively. He had, like, a Force of Will and a Pact of Negation. And I was like, well, I don't want to, like, play my One Ring now, because if I do that, then the next person's going to be able to do it. And I should have just, like, been like, all right, dude, like, I think there's worse stuff going on, so you can Force of Will this if you want, but... And
interesting. That's such a cool takeaway. That's a cool lesson learned from that experience.
Yeah, I just think I should have made people do stuff more. You know what I mean? Like, I think I shouldn't have been scared. Like, there was one guy, I ended up drawing my last game. It ended up being a 3-player game because we all had 2 draws, and there was no chance of any of us making the top 16 cut. So the fourth guy just like went and got dinner or something, you know?
Yeah.
And so it was a 3-player game, and I ended up going to a draw because on my turn, I ended up getting there with the Hazel's Devoted Druid line. But I got silenced, and so I couldn't cast any spells, and we were at time. So, like, what I would have done is won on the next player's upkeep with my entire, grave, like, all of my counter spells in my hand, right?
But because you went to
we went to time, it ended there. And what I should have done is he was going to cast a silence on one of my earlier turns, and I didn't really need to do anything. Like, it didn't matter. I didn't need to do anything on that turn. And so I should have been like, yeah, whatever. Because then it would have been a silence gone. So later, when it did matter, there wasn't a silence.
Well, you kind of virtually won that. You were pretty close to winning that game.
Yeah,
it sounds like you had multiple very close games. Which is cool.
Exactly. They were all pretty close, which was really fun.
You should feel good about that then.
I think I do. There's like a part of me that's like, oh, but I should have won them. You know what I mean? And I still feel really good about it. So that is my report. That is one of my New Year's resolutions was to attend a tournament, and I've done it.
One of your other New Year's resolutions was to build another CEDH deck. Did stuff you see at the tournament or stuff that you're seeing in the Ether Drift? Spoilers? Are any of those things inspiring you to build a new CEDH deck?
Yeah, so from the Aether spoilers, Hashaton is getting a ton of eyes because it's a 2-mana Esper commander that has like virtually uncounterable get a creature out of your graveyard. Yeah, exactly, which is really crazy. But I think it'd be cool. The more I'm seeing everyone like Hashaton, I'm like, maybe I don't want to build Hashaton. You know what I mean? Like, there's part of me that's like, maybe I just keep sticking with Tasigur. I think walking away from the tournament, honestly, made me want to build a blue farm deck, which is Timna Crom, Sans Green. It's watching it play, like red having, first of all, Timna is just crazy because you're drawing 1 to 2 additional cards a turn before you have any other advantage ins out, which is kind of nuts. And I mean, you're getting benefit from playing your creatures like Grand Abolisher or like Ranger Captain because you attack with them or whatever, which is kind of sick. But even on top of that, you have access to like really good red stuff, right? So I think the benefit of being in red and blue by itself is that you have the Brain Freeze, Lion's Eye Diamond.
You get another very efficient combo line.
A very efficient combo line, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because like ultimately all you need is Underworld Breach and everything else in your graveyard, right? But in those colors, you can also be playing like Savine's Reclamation and Intuition to get Savine's Reclamation, Underworld Breach, and Lion's Eye Diamond.
And in that deck, you don't need green because, like in Tasigur, you're just playing green for the pod effects, right? Because
the pod effects and the ramp too, which is kind of nice. Yeah. But being in white, like Smothering Tithe was crazy. I saw everyone crushing Smothering Tithe, and Deflecting Swat is just like another free counter spell, and Red Blast, Pyroblast, stuff like that. I don't know. The more I was watching those piles play, the Sans Green piles, it was just like, dang, these are actually pretty bonkers.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Well, I'm excited for your CEDH journey in 2025.
Thank you. We're gonna do some more tournaments, mostly local ones, but it'll be good.
Yeah. Well,
but you also had a New Year's resolution.
I'm also trying to do stuff. One of my New Year's resolutions was to play more limited, and so I'm jumping in, and it's very easy right now because Arena has a cube online right now, and by the time this video comes out, it'll only have like 2 more days online. But it is just one of my favorite ways to draft. So I've been jamming a lot of cube, and I've actually been partially as a way to keep myself accountable that I'm actually going to draft more. I've been recording my gameplay and I'm posting it on a channel, Keltson MTG. So I'll link that in the description if anyone needs.
Can you do a little pop-up link?
Oh yeah, I could try doing a pop-up. We haven't done one of those on a video before, but yeah, if you need some background noise, or if you want to coach me and help me get better at limited, you can head over there, and I'll be posting. I'm going to try and post 2 times a week on Wednesday and Friday for the kind of off days from this podcast. And then if I play extra, then those will just be bonus videos. There's a lot of videos right now just because I'm drafting cube and I just want to draft a lot of cube, but I'm excited to jump into Ether Drift. So if you want to see any Ether Drift drafts, head over there and subscribe so that you can get notified when I start posting those next week. Yeah.
Nice. I mean, I watched your video already. It's fun. You do a really good job. You went 7-1 in that one with a Selesnya deck of all things, which I believed could happen.
I did. I feel like I got lucky on that one. I feel I need to get better at like communicating while I'm drafting, like what I'm thinking and what I'm doing. But my brain is still trying to just like figure out what I'm supposed to be doing, and so that's a tough balance.
Yeah, you and I both drafted a decent amount of Chromatic Cube, but not a ton, and it also changes, so it's hard to know like what are the good cards to draft and what else exists in like to work with those. You know,
I actually really like this iteration. They posted an article about it, and one of the things they did was just like take out the big expensive you win the game when you play the spell cards, because that's kind of what Chromatic Cube is supposed to be. It's supposed to be like very easy to splash things, and it's supposed to be like kind of rampy, where you're like ramping into like huge threats. And what they noticed was like some of these threats, especially the alchemy ones that were like 6 or 7 mana, are just like so good it just ends the game on the spot, and they didn't like how that was playing. So I actually like that this one's a little bit more focused on like early plays. I think that's kind of cool, kind of fun. So
yeah, that's
I would say, and really quick, one of my other goals was to like invite more people to come play, and we had some people reach out on our Discord, and they were like, "Yeah, we'd really love to to like come play." And so we are going to try and figure out something. So if you are in Utah and you would enjoy getting together for a Commander Pod like Commander Night at some point, join our Discord, because that's where we're going to post about it. Join the Discord. We'll set up a channel for people who would be interested in that, and we're going to reach out to some of the local game stores to see if they might want to help us host maybe a monthly or something like that game night. We'd really love to get to play some Magic with you all.
Yeah, for sure. Shout out Sizzly Surprise. Hope it's okay that we're shouting you out. He reached out to us. He'd been in our Discord participating in December, but he reached out and was like, "Hey, I'm in Utah, and if you guys, I'd be super stoked if you guys," because we talked about doing that in one of our episodes, I guess. And thank you for like saying you were interested, because that kind of gave us the kick in the pants
motivation to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. Well, enough about our New Year's goals. This week, we're going to be talking about using your resources efficiently, and specifically your 2 most important resources, which are mana and cards.
Yes. The general wisdom is that you want to be mana efficient. I feel like that's one of the first things you learn when you're getting into Magic and Commander is that you want to play things on curve. You want to use all of your mana, because once you untap, you have essentially wasted mana that you've not used, right?
Yeah. I think I learned this a lot in Limited. It was like one of the first big like level ups that you get in Limited is like, oh, you want to go 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, and then you're doing really well if you can just kind of curve out and use all your mana every turn. But then there's a level up on top of that once you get experienced enough to know when not to use all of your mana.
Yeah, because most of the time when you have made that level up to spend all your mana, what you're also doing is you are spending cards for the most part.
And sometimes at a really fast rate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and that can become a problem because your cards are also a resource. So while mana efficiency is important and you want to be using your mana, I would argue, and I think you agree with me, that card efficiency is even more important, right?
I think so. Yeah, and we talked about this. We tried to like reason it out, and we even tried to math it out a little bit. I think we did some conservative estimates and calculations, and I think what we came out to was that for the number of mana that you produce in a game versus the number of cards that you see in a game, it's close to like a 4-to-1 ratio, where it's about like 4 mana to every 1 card. And that's conservative. You could draw a ton of cards, or you could produce a ton of mana, or whatever. But conservatively, 4-to-1. Yeah. And in general, your deck is probably on average going to be a little less than 4, right? So you actually end up, if you were to just spend all your mana, you're going to be burning through your cards super, super fast.
Yeah, well, because you are drawing a card every turn, right? Mm-hmm. But if you're hitting your land drops, then you're also playing a land every turn. So if you're also casting a spell, let alone 2 spells each turn, right, to be mana efficient, then you are like card negative overall, right?
Every turn.
Every turn, if you're hitting your land drops. And so obviously card draw is important. It's one of the vegetables. We've talked about that card draw is very important, and we need to be including enough card draw in our decks so that we have more cards. But also, not just throwing your cards around willy-nilly because you have the mana is very important, right? Like, I guess let's talk about an example.
Yeah.
Once upon a time, Keltson and I were playing a commander game, and I cast a Talisman of Indulgence on turn 2. And Keltson had mana available, so he cast Memory Lapse, targeting my Talisman Indulgence, which, time walked me, set me back a turn. And then I drew that card and played it again. But also, his Memory Lapse was gone. And so if there was something else coming up in the future, like maybe it would have been better to hold it for that. Is it mana efficient? Yes. Is it card efficient? No. That's like, and I think that's an example of maybe when it's like better to not spend your mana, even though you could on something.
So it was a mistake. I shouldn't have done that. From my perspective, I'm holding a hand full of interaction. I had like 2 counter spells and like a bounce spell. And I was just like, this is so much interaction. I don't need all of this. And I'm gonna read Memory Lapse really quick.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
I'm sure we've already shown it on the screen by now, but 1 and a blue for an instant counter target spell. If that spell is countered this way, put it on top of its owner's library instead of into that player's graveyard. It's a great interaction spell, and it can hit any spell. And I believe you were playing Strephon.
I was.
Is like a very aggressive, like speedy vampire deck. And I was scared of Strephon, especially because I knew that my deck was a really bad matchup against Strephon.
Sure.
And so my thought was, well, if I can slow him down and I've got extra cards to spend, extra interaction to spend, then why not? It's probably a good idea. I could have just memory lapsed the Strephon. And that's probably even more of a setback because then your commander, which wasn't in your hand, goes on top of your deck and then you have to draw into that. And normally your commander's always available to you anyway.
Right.
So it was a mistake. I just wanted to do it because I had the cards and I had the mana and, A plus B, it made sense in my head and I immediately knew it was the wrong decision. And it's because I was trying to be mana efficient, and I needed to save that threat even though I had the mana available. All right, the response to a threat even though I had the mana available.
Yeah, I mean, there's a world where that's still correct, right? To have, I just said that, and someone on the other day commented that this is the "There Is a World" episode, which I think evidently I say a lot. But like. Yeah. There is a scenario where that is correct. We'll replace one word, and hopefully it won't be as big of a deal. But I don't think it is correct on the whole, right? Like, if we were to switch this around and say it was not a Talisman of Indulgence, but a Land of War Elves or something, right? And not a Memory Lapse, but a Swords to Plowshares. Like, you would never, ever be like, I have the mana, Swords to Plowshares, your Land of War Elves, right?
No, not in Commander.
Even if you had Path to Exile and Anguished Unmaking or whatever, like all of the good removal, I don't think you'd ever just be like, I'm going to nuke this Land of War Elves, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you would, because I don't know. Maybe you would, but I don't think that is a decision I would make because it is such an efficient removal spell that I'd rather hit someone's giant threat that comes down later, right?
Totally. And if I was scared of Strephon, I should have saved it for Strephon, even though I had more removal in my hand.
Sure.
Like, it wasn't slowing you down enough, and it wasn't progressing my game plan at all. And, like, my deck wants to cast spells when I have something out that cares about spells. Yeah. And it was so early in the game. I didn't benefit from that at all. So, really, it only set you back, and it set me back, and the other 2 players got to get ahead.
Yeah, they were like, woo, nice, thanks.
Yeah, sick. You just time walked both of yourselves, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think the point is, if we're answering the why here, like why do we think card efficiency is more important, is that they're both like very important resources and they're both very effective resources, right? You need mana and you need spells to be able to cast. If you have tons of mana and no spells, oops, that's bad. If you have tons of spells and no mana, that's also very bad. If I had to choose one of those things, I think I would prefer to be somewhat restricted on mana and have lots of cards and options to be able to do things.
Yeah.
Rather than a ton of mana and nothing to spend it on, right?
I think so. I mean, we were in a game the other day. We were playing a high power game. Actually, you weren't there. I was playing a power game, and someone had a wildly explosive start. Like fast mana, dumped their hand by like turn 2 or 3, and everyone was so scared and targeted them down. And then they were left with like nothing to do because they didn't have any draw. They didn't have any card advantage after that. And so then they had mana and no cards. And after they were like, I probably need some more card advantage, and I probably didn't need to go quite that fast. Even though those are the hands in Commander that a lot of the times look the coolest. When you're like, I have Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, like a really great like 4 or 5 drop and like 3 lands. And you just like dump your hand on turn 2, and then it was a really cool start, but now you don't have anything to do, right?
Yeah. So this is actually I actually just watched a play to win episode that talks about this a little bit. They did an episode on mulligans. Yeah, on mulligans,
okay.
which I think is one of the skills that's very difficult to learn when you're getting into CDH. And they talked about this as being a pitfall of newer CDH players. Is a ramp to nowhere hand where you have all of the fast mana, and you're like, this is like a quintessential CDH start. I'm gonna have so much mana, but you have no plan, right? And what their point was, some decks are like totally fine with this. Like if you're playing Kinnan, then you're like, sick, dump my hand, play Kinnan, spin, right? And then you're just like getting fat creatures off the top, and it's awesome. If you are playing maybe even like a Thrasio, like a Thrasios plus something else pile, you can start activating Thrasios and stuff. And like to some degree, you could do that with Tassiger a little bit as well. But like for the most part, you want to have like an actual game plan. So what it sounds like to me is that this might have been like a classic pitfall of, this is a little bit of a tangent, of ramping to nowhere. Like I'm playing high power, I have all of this ramp. Let's go off to the races, right?
It's so commander dependent. Like having card draw in the command zone, card advantage in the command zone is so powerful.
Uh-huh.
It's just like one less thing you need to find in your deck. It's crazy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so like if you have stuff that can ramp you and then you're playing like Tymna, right? And they happen to be creatures that are ramping, then you're like, awesome. I also get to attack with these ramp creatures and we can get some Tymna draws or something. But if you're
would you rather have ramp in the command zone or card draw in the command zone?
Ooh. I think card draw in the command zone. I think so.
So I love having
card draw in the command zone though.
This is such a tangent. This has nothing to do with, I mean, it kind of does. But if you had, I'm theory crafting here. If you have ramp in the command zone, I'm trying to think of a commander that's like not banned because I'm just thinking of Raphaelos because I love Raphaelos. I'm trying to think of a commander Selvala. Yeah, cool. So like the cool thing about having ramp in the command zone is you can fill your deck with card advantage. And like card advantage is good in your deck. Ramp is less good in your deck, but you need it.
Yeah.
And so it's like,
Selvalla's a bad example, actually, because she draws you cards. Sorry, keep going.
Oh, Selvala is a bad example? Oh, yeah.
Because she's both.
Yeah, and you have to have creatures. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I guess having ramp in the command zone lets you play more good cards, better cards in the deck in the 99.
Sure, you can play. You can get away with playing less ramp. Probably depends on the mana cost of your commander.
Sure,
like maybe
that's true because a lot of times you're ramping to your commander.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe Marwyn the Nurturer is a better example.
Raphaelos is so good,
right? Yeah, because it's turn 2. That honestly, I think that's why he's so insane. Like because Marwyn the Nurturer is like pretty solid, but you have to get out some other elves.
Yeah,
and yeah, I think so. For me, I'd rather have card advantage in the command zone. And I think that's probably because I think it's better to have cards than to ramp a lot.
Yeah,
like
I think we agree there. I do think we agree there. Like you need to be very intentional and efficient with your cards because I do think it is the less renewable resource.
Yes,
like mana, you're always going to untap with your mana, and it's not particularly hard to ramp. But you're going to spend your cards faster than you're going to spend your mana.
Yeah, the fact that you accumulate mana over time, and like you said, it is renewable because it resets every turn, right? And I think that goes back to what we were saying is that like cards are just depleting over time, right? But mana,
especially because 40% of your deck is lands,
right?
And so you're always playing at least 2 cards a turn if you're playing a land and then casting 1 spell. And so 3 cards a turn if you're double spelling, because you really want to be double spelling Commander. 3 cards a turn, you're just the attrition on your hand size is crazy.
Yeah, so I think maybe the takeaway for a little bit is play card advantage. Like having card advantage in your deck is so important. Like that's maybe like the sub bullet takeaway of this is make sure you have card advantage. The main one being
it does fix a lot of problems for decks, right?
It does. So
like
much.
A lot of times when someone's like, my deck's not doing anything, it's like you're not running enough card advantage.
Yeah, well, it's because you have 2 cards in hand and you're not, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I think what's actually interesting about cards that I've been thinking about recently of cards like Cultivate and Kodama's Reach. Because I think Nature's Lore, and like people like Nature's Lore and 3 visits because they're the more efficient ones.
Like
a land enters untapped, right? They're very good.
And it's a forest.
And it's a forest, right? It fixes your mana maybe a little more, definitely more efficiently. I will say the benefit of Kodama's Reach and Cultivate and stuff like that is that they are ramp and card advantage spells. Because they're getting a land.
You were going to tell me it was because Kodama's Reach is an arcane spell.
It's because it's an arcane spell and you can splice. You can splice with arcane. No, it's because they're ramp and card advantage, right? They're putting a card into your hand and a card on the battlefield. So like they're replacing themselves.
That's
and
true.
If you have to be playing, it helps you your land drop first of all. But if you have to be playing a card each turn, you're getting one for free from those, right?
Yeah.
It's turning into a land in your hand and on the battlefield. And I think I need to be playing those far more than I am.
I've stopped playing them a lot in favor of like the 2 mana ramp, and then someone like the bigger ramp, right? Like I'll play the 2 mana to get to 4 mana, and then I'll play like the 4 mana ramp to get to 6 mana or 7 mana, right? And so I'm kind of skipping over the 3 mana slot, and I probably shouldn't do that as much.
Yeah, I just think they're very good because they are. Because I mean, I think it's really easy to think, oh, I'm drawing a card every turn. Like if I'm drawing like maybe one more, then that's fine. Which is keeping you which will keep you card neutral if you're playing land and casting spell each turn.
It's so good with dorks, right? Like a turn 1 Land War Elves and then a turn 2 Kodama's Reach.
Oh,
like that's backbreaking for your opponents, right?
Oh, and then Kodama's Reach into Flare of Cultivation. You sack your Land War Elves.
I love it.
That's actually one I want to be playing more. By the way, I think that's a sick spell. Yeah, well, because it's Cultivate. That you can also cast for free.
Sure. Yeah, I mean that early in the game though, you're probably sacking a mana dork, so it's not like as much advantage. But
yeah, though,
if someone board wipes, you can turn your dork into a land, right?
Yeah, it's a sorcery.
Oh yeah, it's a sorcery. Dang it! Is that the only one that's a sorcery? Is Malice also a sorcery?
No, Flare of Malice is an instant. Yeah, it's the only.
Is this the only? It's the only sorcery. Oh man, Green got gypped so hard.
Yeah.
I think they knew that would be too powerful.
Yeah, it would be so nuts if you could do that. Though it does turn your temporary ramp into essentially permanent ramp, which is kind of sick at the cost of 2 cards. It's not that great, but I think it's kind of cool still.
It is so cool. So let's talk about ways that you can be both card efficient and mana efficient, because you can do both.
You 100% can do both. You 100% can do both. I will say part of what has shaped my opinion about this has been playing like some 1v1 formats a little bit, and especially like Chromatic Cube. Because, and like limited, I think, just like in general, because our first suggestion here is to play mana sinks.
Sure.
And I think so I just came away from playing a bunch of Foundations, and one of my favorite cards from Foundations was Strix.
Not Serenade.
Lookout. Strix Lookout.
Strix Serenade is from Modern Horizons.
Yeah, Strix Serenade is a counterspell. Strix Lookout is a 1/2, 1 and a blue for a 1/2 bird with flying and vigilance, and it has 1 and a blue tap to draw a card and then discard a card.
Cool.
Which is like so good. Like having a 1/2 that's first of all in the air, attacks and can block, and then also lets you spend mana that you wouldn't have spent. Like you can play a 2-drop on turn 4. You play a 2-drop and then you just like loot for a land or whatever.
After it's attacked because it has vigilance.
After it's attacked, like it's crazy. Now this type of effect, especially a draw card, discard a card effect, does not feel as good in commander, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there are plenty of effects that are very, very good mana sinks
Like
that are
Fairy
on commanders.
Mastermind.
Like Fairy Mastermind is a very good one.
Yeah.
It's
not on a commander, but
not on a commander. It costs 4 mana, and it draws all of your opponents a card, which is not as good. But, like, if you can get a Training Grounds out or something like that, then you are, you activate it a couple times, and then all of a sudden, you're drawing 5 cards to everyone else's 2, which is pretty good.
Very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, I think mana sinks are awesome. This also makes me want to play more stuff like green Tireless Tracker. Tireless Tracker is 2 and a green for a 3/2 human scout. It has landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, you investigate, which means you create a clue token, which you can pay 2 to sacrifice to draw a card. And whenever you sacrifice a clue, you put a 1/1 counter on this creature. This card's pretty good, and it's also just giving you something because it's a beater because you're going to be sacking clues and making this thing bigger. But like more importantly, it's just like for free spitting out rectangles that you can spend mana on to draw cards.
Yeah,
it's
really cool.
Good.
Like, I will say, if like 2 mana is a lot, right? Like you are, if you are trying to play stuff on curve, it's hard to hold up 2 mana all the time.
Mm-hmm.
However, in what we were talking about is that you do have up mana and you're spending it on like interaction, right? You're casting a spell and you're holding up like a 2 mana interaction spell, and clues or activated abilities or of creatures that cost 2 mana or like foods or whatever are perfect examples for being mana efficient without just throwing your cards away, right? You just wait until someone else's end step. You activate a clue, draw a card, and then you keep and you move to your turn, right? And you have
if I'd had a clue when I had all that interaction in hand, then I could have waited to see if anybody played something that was worth memory lapsing, like not a talisman. And if they don't have anything that I really want to interact with, then I can just basically cycle that mana away to draw a card by using a clue. So out of I'm clue, food, blood. How would you rank the tokens?
Oof. Probably clue, blood, food.
That's how I would rank them too.
I think so.
Yeah. I do think that blood is maybe like a little undervalued.
I think if you can make blood tokens work for you, like one of the things that was craziest to me was when I was able to get out File of Galadriel in my Strefon blood tokens deck.
Yeah.
Let's read File of Galadriel really quick. I mean, obviously things that like double the cards you draw always is very good. Like Alhamret's Archive or whatever, which doubles whenever you draw a card, you draw 2 cards.
Crazy. Yeah, or Teferi's Ageless Insight, right?
Yeah.
Like those cards always make these things. And like Brainstorm, they make Brainstorm look like it's like the world's best spell.
Yeah, that happened in our game, right? Didn't that happen in our game? Yeah. Crazy. You should go check that one out. A Brainstorm with the Teferi's Ageless Insight drew someone 6 cards. It was nuts. File of Galadriel is not quite as good, but it says if you would draw a card while you have no cards in hand. Sorry, it's a 3 mana legendary artifact. And it says, if you would draw a card while you have no cards in hand, draw 2 cards instead. If you would gain life while you have 5 or less life, gain twice that much life instead. Add 1 mana of any color. So it's kind of like a mini Alhamret's Archive, right? Mm-hmm. It does the same thing as Alhamret's Archive, but only when you have no cards in hand or you have less than 5 life. And it taps for mana, which is also very cool.
It is a rock, important.
It is a rock. Yeah, exactly. In my Strefon deck, it is a blood tokens, artifacts, mini vampire typal deck, right? It's got like kind of a lot of stuff going on, but Strefon makes a lot of blood tokens. It's capable of making a lot of blood tokens. And so it also plays kind of Hellbent, right? We're playing it with an empty hand a lot of the time because you're not getting card advantage from blood tokens. Pardon me. And you are like getting getting vampires out of your hand for free, right? And so it's not like particularly card efficient. But File of Galadriel is very cool because it can, if I have 1 card in hand, that's enough to activate a blood token, which is you pay 1, you tap it, and you discard a card, and then you draw a card. So if it's my last card in hand, what happens is I pay 1, tap it, and I discard a card, and then I draw 2 cards, which is
pretty sweet.
So sick.
It
and then
feels
you can
good.
cast a spell, and you can do it again. You can keep going on, on the whole blood token train, and kind of keep playing Hellbent, which is kind of sick.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely.
Anyway, I think they're very good. I think they're undervalued. But there's a lot of things like this that are very good. One of the things that I've wanted to play again recently is Verena Lich Queen. This deck, the zombie deck from Aether Church, the Hashaton deck. Yeah, I think it's actually not. Hashaton's like the second commander in it. It's
Oh yeah, it is.
Yeah, so it's funny. The scare. Oh, I can't remember the name of it.
Whatever the other one is.
Whatever the other one is. It is a Esper zombie deck, and my Will Help the Rock Cleaver deck was originally Verena Esper Zombies deck, and I don't think that I valued Verena's activated ability enough when I played that deck because I built it to be kind of higher power, and honestly was not as I was a much less experienced deck builder at the time. And it's made me want to build it again because I do think I'd be able to take advantage better of these type of mana sinks.
That's cool. That's really cool. So the first way to play both mana efficient and card efficient is to have mana sinks available. The second one we talked about before, we already mentioned, more card draw. If my memory lapse had cantripped from something like Archmage Emeritus, that would have been way better I wouldn't have felt bad kind of burning a card on a suboptimal target if I knew I was getting that card back, if I wasn't going down a card.
100%. Yeah, I think you feel much better about that. The other scenario I was thinking of is if you had because what would have happened is if you hadn't done that, maybe you would have spent all you tapped out to play because you were playing Grima, I believe, right?
I was, and it was a turn 2 play. I didn't have really other stuff going on.
Yeah, there's a world where you can play Grima again, right? You can play Grima. You tap out to play Grima or something else on your turn, and you don't have the opportunity to memory lapse, and you miss some threat. But you also had a bounce spell in hand, so if you had wanted to, you could have bounced something, right? And then when that got to be played again, memory lapsed
then
it or
counter
whatever.
it.
Yeah, or whatever. You know. So
Totally.
I just think it's making sure you're not just. I mean, we're going to sound like a broken record, but just making sure you're not just throwing away cards because you can. I think is the takeaway here. And
if you are drawing a lot of cards, if you're drawing 3 cards a turn cycle, 3 extra cards a turn cycle, yeah, burn those suckers.
100%.
You're not really worried. You're not going to be worried about remaining as card efficient. Card efficiency, the value of card efficiency goes down, and the value of mana efficiency goes up.
100%.
Right? Yeah,
100%. Though I will say there is the risk of you having a bunch of cards, just saying I'm going to use all my mana. I'm going to spend all these cards clear out my hand. And not having mana when you need mana to interact at a crucial interaction point, right?
You still have to be judicious.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You want to make sure you're hitting the biggest threat.
Yes, even if that means discarding down to hand size, right? So that's an example where mana efficiency and having your mana later in the turn cycle when relevant things are going to happen is probably better than having been card efficient and cast all of the cards that you've been drawing, right? So don't think we're going back on it. Make sure you're being judicious with how you're spending your cards. But there's a time when you need to also be efficient and judicious about how you're spending your mana.
Yep. The third way to be both card and mana efficient is to give yourself the opportunity to play things at flash or instant speed.
Yes, this is harder. This is lower on the list because it's not just duh, why wasn't I thinking of that? I should just be playing High Fate Trickster in all of my decks or whatever.
Sure.
Obviously you can't always do this.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of times where you can be doing this.
Yeah, I mean there's so many good ways to just spend 1 or 2 mana. We've talked about Brainstorm before on the podcast. It does not go in every deck. Mm-hmm. But if your deck wants Brainstorm and if it can take advantage of Brainstorm, that is a great thing to do when you've been keeping an offer you can't refuse in your hand and you don't end up spending it. So you just Brainstorm, give yourself some card advantage, fix your next couple of draws, and maybe draw 6 cards if you have a Teferi's Ageless Inside Out.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of little things. There's fewer flash things available if you're not playing blue, right? Like it is difficult to get a lot of those effects in your deck.
Yeah, I would say, especially because what you're trading off here, right, is we've been kind of harping on maybe not playing interaction, right? Using your mana to play interaction, but we still think you should use your mana. So your other options are to like flash in a creature or to play like a card advantage spell, right?
Yeah.
And the cheap card advantage spell, the relatively inexpensive card advantage spells that you will have that you can cast at instant speed are going to be primarily in Grixis, right? Like what I can think of, like the blue card draw spells,
Village Rites,
yeah, exactly,
that kind of stuff,
exactly. And so like you have it in green too, like you have Return of the Wild Speaker, right?
Yeah, for 5 mana,
but it's 5 mana, right? So you're like you're not going to be able to hold up that much mana to potentially cast Return of the Wild Speaker to draw that many cards.
Yeah.
So I think this isn't necessarily the easiest solution for every color and every deck, but I think it is worth considering including more card advantage pieces, and especially card advantage pieces that are instant speed if they are available to you. That being said, there are also like artifacts that can do stuff like this, right? Like,
sure.
Reckoner Bankbuster is like a artifact that you can at instant
That's
speed,
a mana sink, right?
Spend your mana. Yeah, exactly.
So
exactly.
Good.
Yeah, that's true. You're not playing at flash speed. That is a mana sink. But like, yeah, I'm jumping back to the first point. But there are opportunities to do that in these.
If you're in the right colors and in the right deck, play more stuff at flash and instant speed. It's
absolutely
really good.
Absolutely.
And then the fourth way that we would recommend, the last way, would be to politic. I don't need to spend my mana and my card if I can convince somebody else to do it.
If I can convince someone else to memory lapse this Talisman of Indulgence.
Yeah.
Hey, are we worried about this Talisman of Indulgence? Because that's going to be...
This is a serious threat, guys.
That's a serious threat. You got mana open. Come on. We need you to help us here. Help the table out. No, I think... I also think there's room to do what we were talking about that I need to be doing in CDH games to say, hey, look, like I've got this Swords to Plowshares. And what you can do too is I think there's a world where you politic like this. You say, I've got this Swords to Plowshares. Don't swing at me, or else it will die.
Sure,
like you know what I mean.
We hear that all the time,
for sure. And I think
that is where you're going to be sending that damage.
Yeah,
because I might have a way to deal with it if it's coming at me.
Yeah,
but if you don't swing at me, I won't interact with it.
Yeah, and I think what I need to do more, honestly, is rather than being like cryptic about it, is just say, look, I have a Swords to Plowshares, and I will nuke this thing if it swings at me. You know what I mean?
I think another way that you can do it too, if you do want to be cryptic about it, is when you do see a threat, react.
Yes.
Help the rest of the table recognize that it is a threat.
Shout.
Yeah, be like, oh no, we have to get rid of that. That's going to be a problem. Or I've seen this before. It can get out of hand very quickly. We need to interact with it now. And guess what? If you're last in priority order, you've now given 2 other people the opportunity to interact with that before it gets back to you, and you have to spend your mana and your cards on it. So there's just a lot of ways to help it make problems a table problem and not just a you problem.
So I have a question about this.
Okay.
I have been thinking about this a lot in a CDH context, but I think it also is relevant in casual. How suspicious is it to be 4th in priority, right? And to say, all right, priority is on you. Do you know what I mean? Like, how much does that scream, I have interaction, but you have to choose first?
It does. I still see people interact with it, though. Because you can be like, okay, what happens is a spell goes on the stack that I don't want to or that I think needs to be interacted with.
Yeah.
And if you can make a habit of being like, okay, we need to go to priority order to see if anybody can interact with this. And then go, do you have anything? Do you have anything? And then it gets back to you. You may not have anything, and that's fine. But you've established an expectation that when there's a threat, we need to go to priority order.
I need to be better about being so consistent about that, because I am so bad at my poker face is terrible because I'm so bad at being like, all right, like, yep, I'm gonna pass on it. Though I sometimes will do that if I have interaction, but I think I need to be better about just like being really consistent with my responses to threats being put on the stack.
The best feeling is when you do have interaction, and you're about to play it, and then the person after you in priority order like jumps the gun and is like, "Oh, I counterspell that." I'm like,
yes,
yes. That always feels so good.
It feels great because you have no like you're like, yeah, whatever, I passed on
great,
it.
Whatever. Yeah, that always feels really good. The snap counterspell from the fourth player,
priority order. Yeah, feels really good. Feels really good. So
that's awesome.
1, play mana sinks. 2, play more card draw because if your cards are replacing themselves, you're less worried about cards being inefficient. Play at flash and instant speed if that's available to you. If not, see point 1 and play mana sinks.
Yeah.
And then 4th, politic. Something I need to be much better at. Communicate.
It doesn't. Politicking has such a dirty connotation sometimes, but like it's really about communication and just saying like, hey, what are you going to do? Here's what I'm willing to do. Or here's what I'm going to do. Would you like to change how you're going to approach that? Like, it doesn't have to feel so slick, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I learned that lesson a little bit the hard way where I was playing a CDG like a year ago now. This is when I was first playing, and I've been drawing a bunch of cards. And someone put an ad nauseum on the stack, and I was first in priority order, and I knew because the person who ad nauseum had get probed the person fourth in priority order, and they had a counterspell. And I was like, all right, pass priority. And this dude was like, I know you have like you've been drawing so many cards. Yeah. And so he also passed priority and let the ad nauseum resolve, which I do think was like potentially a little bit of a spite play, even though I was like kind of priority bullying. I think there's also a scenario to spend your counter mad, like politic that way to be like, look, yeah,
I got this one.
Clearly I've got something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then let someone else like stop at, back you up or whatever.
Yeah, because they might have had a way to deal with your counter magic, and then you needed that other person to be able to use their counter spell.
Right, exactly.
That's a good lesson to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we're talking about being card inefficient, I think the way we've been harping on this whole time is not just casting spells because you have the mana, especially interaction, like key spells like interaction.
Yeah.
We want to be spending our mana. We want to be spending it on things that aren't just throwing cards away, which would be Swords to Plowshares on a Llanowar Elves, or something even dinkier, like a 1/1, like a token goblin or whatever, because you don't want to get hit for 1 damage.
Sure.
And you had the mana. I think the other way that you could be card inefficient that we've not touched on yet is overplaying your hand, which I think is also a very large pitfall to newer players, less experienced players, or people that are just like popping off. It's easy when you're popping off to be like, I've got all this mana, dump my hand, play everything that I've got. The problem is in Commander, you're playing against several opponents, and especially in Casual, lots of people are playing board wipes. So if you are dumping your hand and being very mana efficient, using all of your mana, but dumping the cards in your hand, and you get board wiped, how bad does that feel to be just like entirely set back, right?
Yeah. This happens all the time. I mean, this is like such a common occurrence in Commander.
It used to happen to me a lot more. It happens to me in some of my more gung-ho decks, like Strephon. Right.
Yeah.
Strephon, this is going to happen, which is why I've started putting I might try to put like Wheel of Fortune in the deck because I don't feel like it's that busted of a card in that deck necessarily. But I put in Magus of the Wheel because then I can, if I get board wiped, it's a card I can draw and then eventually turn into a fresh hand of 7.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Which those colors can struggle to do.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And so there's obviously colors where you can protect yourselves much better. And so I wouldn't worry about overplaying your hand in that scenario. And again, I would be worried about making sure you have the mana when you need the mana rather than tapping out and being mana efficient.
Keeping up that T-Pro mana in white every turn.
Exactly. Well, now Dawn's Truce in white as well.
Dawn's Truce is so good.
Yeah, white's feeling pretty good.
Yeah.
Or Final Showdown, which is also so good.
I got Final Showdown the other day in my draft.
Ugh. Oh, did you
Felt
really?
so bad. Yeah,
Oh
it's
my
in cube right now.
gosh,
Yeah, it was
that's
rough.
crazy. Yeah, it's a sick card. I think it's really easy when you have a lot of mana. It's really easy to overplay your hand and just like dump cards out of your hand. And I think it's something to be wary of. In addition,
Having
to
a
the things we've
backup
been
plan
harping
isn't
on.
a bad idea. If you already have stuff going on, if you've already got the advantage, you don't always have to press the advantage. You
Yeah.
can say, "Hey, I'm drawing a ton of cards. I got a lot of creatures on board. Whatever your advantage engine looks like at the time," and you're like, "I could play this card, but it doesn't meaningfully contribute to what I'm doing right now. But it is a really good backup plan if what I'm doing now gets interrupted." So
Yeah, I think that is like the key. Is it's important to press your advantage and extend your lead, but like the quality of creatures and enchantments and everything we have now, the nature of them being on board and you already being ahead,
yeah.
your lead will just kind of extend or at least be maintained.
It's also going to make you a bigger arch enemy. It's going to make people want to board wipe faster.
100%. Yeah, and maybe collude to board wipe faster.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, how often does that happen? We're like, okay, one of the three of us needs to find a board wipe. How can we help each other find a board wipe?
Right. I can draw you cards if you need to.
Happens all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Well, everybody, this is the end. Our conclusion is that it is more important to be card efficient than mana efficient, though those are both very important. And
yes.
I mean, clearly we've kind of gone back and forth on when one is more important than the other. But the moral of the story today is spend your mana, but spend it wisely and spend your cards wisely as well, because you don't want to just be throwing them away when inevitably more relevant threats will appear.
More relevant than Talisman of Indulgence.
This was all my way of saying, Keltson, you were wrong for memory lapsing my Talisman of Indulgence.
I stand by it. I'll do it. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Be sure to check out our gameplay episode. We tried another format. It's a lot of fun. Join us in the Discord. Like we said, we're gonna try and plan some in-person events if you're local. Like and subscribe. And until next time, remember to always pay the one.